So, picture this. You walk into a hardware store, right? And your goal is super simple. You just need to buy a $10 hammer.
Right, just a basic, straightforward errand.
Exactly. You know exactly what you need. You literally have the cash in your pocket, and you're planning to be in and out in like 5 minutes. But then 20 minutes later, you're walking out of those automatic doors. You've got the hammer, sure, but you also have this $50 extended warranty that you absolutely do not need.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Plus, you have like 3 random impulse buys from the checkout aisle, and you've somehow agreed to sign up for a recurring monthly donation to a charity you had literally never heard of until today.
It's the classic trap.
It is. And you stop in the parking lot, you look down at your receipts, and this chilling realization washes over you. Like, what? Just hijacked my brain.
Yeah, it's a deeply unsettling feeling, isn't it? Because you suddenly realize your conscious, rational mind wasn't actually the one driving the car in there.
No, not at all.
You were basically just in the passenger seat, watching your own hands hand over your credit card.
That is exactly the feeling we're exploring today. So, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are stripping down the mechanics of human compliance.
Yeah, we're really looking at the fundamental psychological architecture of persuasion.
Right. And we are drawing heavily on the monumental work of Robert Cialdini, specifically his landmark book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. Plus, we've got some incredible breakdowns from the Psych Talk YouTube channel, looking at the realm of social psychology.
And, we should probably establish right up front that Cialdini isn't just some guy with a theory.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. I mean, he was a professor of psychology at Arizona State University for years, but he essentially went undercover for this research. He actually answered ads for sales jobs. He trained with telemarketers. He worked with fundraisers. He wanted to observe these tactics out in the wild.
Like a spy, basically.
Basically, yeah. He spent over 30 years infiltrating these worlds to figure out the exact biological and psychological levers that literally force humans to say yes.
And for you listening right now, the mission of this deep dive is not, and I repeat, is not to teach you how to become some master manipulator.
No, definitely not the goal.
Right. We aren't handing you a playbook so you can go out and trick your friends. We are doing the exact opposite. We're trying to hand you the blueprints to your own mental vulnerabilities.
Exactly. So you can build an ironclad psychological defense mechanism. Because, honestly, the absolute best, and really the only way to defend against a sophisticated psychological tactic is to see it coming.
If you don't know the rules of the game being played against you, you've already lost.
You've completely lost, yeah. Awareness is your only shield.
So let's lay some groundwork first. I want you to imagine the human brain as this highly advanced, incredibly efficient computer operating system.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. So if this operating system had to consciously analyze every single piece of data it encounters, every sight, sound, social cue, every micro decision, it would instantly overheat and crash.
Oh, for sure. We make thousands of decisions a day.
Exactly. So to prevent a system failure, our brains rely heavily on mental shortcuts or, what psychology calls heuristics.
Yeah, heuristics. Think of a heuristic as a cognitive rule of thumb. It's basically a biological energy-saving mode.
Like low power mode on your phone.
Exactly. Evolutionarily speaking, the brain consumes a massive amount of our body's glucose. It's an energy hog. So to survive, early humans had to conserve energy wherever possible. We evolved these automatic reflexive responses to certain really common situations.
So like when X happens, just automatically do Y.
Right, no deep thinking required. It keeps us functioning without burning out.
So these shortcuts are actually a feature, not a bug. They keep us alive. But what we're talking about today is what happens when someone figures out how to, weaponize those features.
And that's exactly what marketers and salespeople do. They've essentially found the root access exploits to our operating system.
They know the cheat codes.
They really do. They know how to artificially trigger those automatic responses to get the outcome they want. And that's the terrifying beauty of it. These aren't mystical mind control techniques. They're entirely mechanical.
They just push a button.
Yeah, the persuader isn't changing your mind. They're completely bypassing your mind. They feed your brain a specific stimulus that triggers a hardwired biological response. They push the button and you play the tape.
Wow. Okay, let's jump right into the first exploit because this one targets a massive vulnerability in how we process language. It's about the sheer, unadulterated power of a single word.
Principle number 1, the power of giving people a reason why.
Right. And I feel like this one always surprises people because it seems way too simple to actually work on intelligent adults.
It sounds totally absurd until you actually look at the data.
It really does. So the core concept here is that providing a reason for a request, any reason, drastically increases your chances of getting a yes. And it doesn't even matter if the reason makes logical sense.
Yeah, let's talk about the famous Harvard photocopier study from the late 70s, because it illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, I love this study. Set the scene for us.
So the setup was brilliant in just how mundane it was. Researchers found this busy library copy machine where there was already a long line of frustrated people waiting to make copies.
And anyone who has waited in a line knows that defensive posture you take, right? Like you are guarding your spot.
Oh, absolutely. You're hyper aware of anyone trying to cut. So a researcher would walk up to the person at the very front of the line and try to cut in. In the first scenario, they just asked a direct question. They said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine?"
Okay, pretty direct. How did that go?
They actually had a moderate success rate. About 60% of people let them cut.
60%. That's actually higher than I would expect.
Well, mostly it's out of simple politeness, because it was only 5 pages. It's a small request.
Right, low stakes. But then they altered the phrasing, right?
Yeah. They added a reason. They said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush?"
And what happened?
The compliance rate shot up to 94%.
94%. Almost everyone let them cut.
Almost everyone. Which, logically makes sense. Being in a rush is a valid piece of new information. The person in line weighs their own minor inconvenience against the stranger's urgent need, and empathy kicks in.
Sure, that makes total sense. But here is where the human brain proves itself to be entirely laughably hackable. They ran a third scenario.
This is the crazy part.
They walked up to the front of the line and said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I have to make copies?"
Because I have to make copies. It's a completely empty circular statement.
Right. Everyone in that line has to make copies. That is literally the fundamental nature of a line in front of a copy machine.
It provides absolutely zero new information.
Zero. But what happened to the compliance rate? It stayed at a staggering 93%.
And that right there perfectly exposes the mechanical nature of our mental shortcuts. When we process language in low-stakes situations, we don't always engage our semantic processing.
Meaning we aren't deeply analyzing the actual meaning of the words.
Exactly. Instead, we rely on syntactic processing. We just look at the structural shape of the sentence.
We hear the word because, and it acts like a cue. I always think of it like a bouncer at an exclusive nightclub.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, so the bouncer represents our conscious, critical brain. Someone walks up to the velvet rope and flashes a VIP pass. Now, the bouncer is tired, he's busy, he really wants to conserve energy, so he doesn't actually stop to read the fine print on the pass.
He just recognizes the familiar shape of it.
Exactly. He sees the shiny rectangular shape of the word because. He assumes everything is legitimate, unclips the rope, and just lets the request walk right into the club.
I take that analogy a step further, actually. Humans have a profound, hardwired psychological need for cause and effect. We need the world to make sense,
Right, we hate randomness.
Exactly. So the word because is almost like the ultimate linguistic pacifier. The moment that specific string of syllables hits our auditory cortex, it satisfies our innate demand for justification. The brain just says, okay, a rationale has been provided. The world still makes sense. I can go back to sleep now.
That is so wild. But wait, let me ask you this. Does this mean I can use literally any reason? Like, could I walk up to someone on the street and say, "Hey, can I have your wallet because the moon is made of cheese?" Surely the bouncer wakes up for that, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Context and stakes absolutely matter. This specific shortcut only overrides our critical thinking when the request is relatively small or low stakes.
Like 5 pages at a copier?
Exactly. If the researcher had asked to copy 50 pages instead of 5, that flimsy, because I have to make copies, reason failed miserably. The compliance plummeted. When the stakes are high, the bouncer wakes up, puts on his glasses, and reads the VIP pass very carefully.
That makes sense.
But the thing is, for the thousands of micro decisions and small requests we face every single day, the mere presence of the word because is totally enough to trigger automatic compliance.
So, practically speaking, if you're listening to this, how do you use it? Or better yet, how do you defend against it?
Well, on the practical side, if you're trying to negotiate a minor deadline extension at work, or, you're just trying to get your stubborn 8-year-old to brush their teeth, don't just issue a command.
Right, don't just say brush your teeth.
Say, brush your teeth because we need to keep the bathroom routine going. It doesn't have to be some profound philosophical argument. You just have to feed the brain its required syntax.
Feed the bouncer the VIP pass.
Exactly. And on the defense side, you really need to start listening for that word. Once you tune your ear to it, you will be shocked, honestly shocked, at how often salespeople, politicians, even your colleagues use incredibly weak because statements to just push past your defenses.
Okay, so that's a linguistic vulnerability. It's a verbal hack. But what happens when the trigger isn't a word, but a physical object? What happens when someone forces a tangible item into your hands?
Now we're moving from tricking our logic to completely hijacking our deepest social instincts.
Right. We are entering the obligation trap. Principle number 2, reciprocation.
And if the because hack is just a minor software glitch, reciprocation is a complete core operating system override.
It's that powerful.
Absolutely. We possess this biologically ingrained, overwhelmingly powerful urge to repay kindness with kindness. I mean, anthropologists will argue that it's arguably the foundational pillar of human civilization.
Really? How so? Like evolutionarily?
Yeah, so anthropologists talk about this web of indebtedness. That's what allowed early humans to survive. Think about it. If I hunt a mammoth today and I give you some of my extra meat, I have to trust that when you gather berries next week, you will share them with me.
Right. An unwritten social contract.
Exactly. It allowed humans to divide labor and share resources safely. We are quite literally bred to feel uncomfortable when we owe someone a favor.
We absolutely hate being in social debt. It's the worst feeling.
We despise it. It feels like an actual physical weight. But the exploit here, the hack, lies in the simple act of going first.
Going first.
Yeah. When someone takes the initiative to give you something, even something incredibly small, with no explicit expectation of a return, they unilaterally force you into a state of social debt.
Unilaterally, meaning I didn't even ask for the mammoth meat, but now I own you berries anyway.
Precisely. The transaction doesn't require your consent to be effective. The trap springs either way.
You see this constantly in everyday life. The classic example, right, is the waitress bringing the check at the end of a meal.
All right, the mints.
Yes. If she just drops the check on the table, she gets a standard tip. But if she brings out a little silver tray with a couple of cheap mints on it, her tip percentage statistically shoots up.
Yeah. And there's even a variation on that. If she brings the mints, walks away, and then turns back and says, you know what, for you folks, here are a few extra mints, the tip completely skyrockets.
As if it feels special, but those mints cost her pennies.
Pennies. But the psychological pressure of receiving a gift compels the diner to reciprocate with actual dollars.
Charities are notorious for this too. You go to your mailbox, right, and there is a letter from some wildlife fund you have never interacted with in your life. Inside, there's a sheet of those personalized return address labels, or maybe a cheap little pocket calendar.
Yep, the classic address label.
And you didn't ask for it. You probably use digital calendars. You rarely send physical mail. Objectively, these items are worthless to you. And yet, when you go to throw them in the trash, you feel this agonizing, nagging guilt.
That guilt is literally your evolutionary programming firing off. The charity has initiated that web of indebtedness. The internal dialogue immediately becomes, they did something for me, so now I must do something for them.
It's crazy.
And this instinct is so potent, so overwhelming, that it can force us to return favors to people we genuinely actively dislike.
That is the part that blows my mind. It works even if you hate the person giving you the gift.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Cialdini observed this with the Hare Krishna movement in airports back in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, right, in the terminals.
Yeah. The public generally found them quite annoying. They were actively avoiding them. So the Krishnas changed their tactics. They stopped just walking up and asking for donations. Instead, a member would step right into the path of a traveler and physically press a flower into their hand.
Just hand it to them.
And say, this is our gift to you. Now, if the traveler tried to hand it back, which most did, they would refuse. They'd hold their hands up and say, no, no, it is a gift.
And so what happens? The traveler is standing there, holding a flower they don't want, from a person they actively want to get away from.
But the reciprocity trap has been sprung. The traveler now feels this intense, deeply uncomfortable social imbalance. And the only way to relieve that psychological discomfort quickly is to reach into their pocket, pull out $1, hand it over, and walk away.
They are literally buying their way out of the social debt.
Exactly. They don't want the flower. They don't want to support the cause. They just want to relieve the pressure of the obligation.
It's weaponized politeness. We see it at the grocery store, too. You're just trying to buy milk, and someone steps out from an aisle and hands you a piece of cheese on a toothpick.
The free sample.
The samples. You
Yeah.
take it because it's free and you're polite. But 30 seconds later, you find yourself walking to the register with a $12 block of artisanal Gouda that you don't even really like, purely because you felt bad walking away after eating their sample.
The sample is never just a sample. It is a highly calculated initiation of a psychological sequence. Marketers scale this up massively, by the way.
Like how?
Free trials, complimentary consultations, bonus gifts with a purchase. They are completely willing to take a small financial loss up front because they know the reciprocity instinct will tip the scales heavily in favor of a much larger yes down the line. It's an investment in your guilt.
Okay, so how on earth do you disarm a weaponized piece of cheese? Seriously, if this instinct is deeply biological, what is our defense mechanism here? Do we just have to walk around being incredibly rude to everyone?
No, it's not about being rude at all. It's about redefining the interaction in your own mind. The ultimate defense against this is recognition. When someone offers you a quote-unquote free gift, especially in a commercial or sales setting, you have to consciously pause and recognize its strategic nature.
So you mentally reclassify it. Like, this isn't a friendly gesture, this is a transaction.
Precisely. You label it as a sales device, and once you redefine it that way, the social obligation completely evaporates.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because we are biologically programmed to return favors to fellow tribe members, but we are not programmed to return sales tricks to marketers.
Right.
So the simplest way to avoid the trap is to just politely, firmly refuse the initial offer. No, thank you, I don't need a sample. By not accepting the item in the first place, you prevent the web of indebtedness from ever attaching to you. No gift, no obligation.
Man, that takes some serious mental fortitude, though. It's hard to look a smiling, pleasant person in the eye and reject their gift, but you just have to remember they are playing a numbers game with your psychology.
Exactly.
Okay, so reciprocation is all about feeling an undeniable obligation to others. But what happens when that obligation is turned inward? What happens when we feel an intense, undeniable obligation to our past selves?
This is fascinating territory.
This brings us to principle 3. Commitment and consistency. I like to call this one being tracked by your own tracks.
I like that. This is an incredibly heavy psychological anchor. The core principle here is that once we make a choice, take a stand, or state an opinion out loud, we face immense personal and interpersonal pressure to behave consistently with that initial commitment.
Because nobody wants to be a hypocrite, right?
Right. Evolutionarily, consistency is a highly valued trait. A consistent person is predictable, they're reliable, they're trustworthy. An inconsistent person is viewed by the tribe as flinky, erratic, and potentially dangerous. You can't rely on them.
So we developed a deep-seated dread of appearing indecisive or two-faced.
Exactly. But the hack is that this pressure to remain consistent is so strong, it can completely override logic, reason, and even our own self-interest when new, contradictory information comes to light.
Think about how this is used against us in high-stakes environments, like a job interview or a brutal corporate negotiation. A highly skilled negotiator will never start by just making their demands. They will start by asking you broad, highly agreeable questions to get you to state your goals out loud, on the record. They'll say, you're looking for maximum efficiency and long-term cost savings for your department, correct?
And you naturally say, yes, because who wouldn't?
Right, it's an easy yes. But then, an hour later, they unveil their proposal, and they explicitly align their proposal with the exact goals you just stated. Now you are totally trapped. If you reject their proposal, you are contradicting your own expressly stated values.
You're acting inconsistently.
Exactly.
Salespeople do this masterfully with what we call micro-commitments. They don't ask you to buy the car right away. They start with a tiny, agreeable question. Do you care about your family's safety on the road? You say yes. Are you looking for a vehicle that won't break down in the winter? You say yes.
And with every yes, you are laying down another piece of track.
That's a great analogy. Once you get someone to say yes to a small question, they have taken a stand. They have subtly shaped their internal self-image in that specific moment as, someone who prioritizes safety and reliability.
They're building an identity.
Yes. And from there, the salesperson steadily builds a deliberate series of logically consistent steps. Well, since you prioritize safety, you'll obviously want the upgraded braking package. They literally guide the train down the track you just built, leading you directly toward a massive purchase.
It's so subtle. And, the power of our own effort is huge here, too. Look at the IKEA effect.
Oh, a perfect example.
We place vastly more financial and emotional value on flat-pack furniture purely because of the physical effort we invested in building it. Like, if you buy a pre-assembled bookshelf, it's just a bookshelf.
Oh, yeah.
But if you spend 3 hours sweating over confusing Swedish diagrams, stripping screws with that little hex key, that slightly wobbly bookshelf becomes a priceless artifact in your home.
Because you've implicitly committed to its value through your own labor, your brain completely refuses to accept the idea that you just wasted 3 hours building a piece of junk. So it alters your perception of the item to justify the effort. It's cognitive dissonance resolution happening in real time.
It is so wild how we lie to ourselves. But the scariest part is how immediate this consistency trap can snap shut. It doesn't always take 3 hours of building furniture. Sometimes it takes 3 seconds.
Yeah. Let's talk about the horse track example.
Yes. Consider the behavior of gamblers at horse racing tracks. Tell them about this study because it's mind-blowing.
It's one of the most stark illustrations of this principle. So, researchers studied gamblers who were standing in line to place a bet. While they were waiting, they were generally hesitant, uncertain, and pretty anxious about their chosen horse's chances.
Which is rational. It's gambling. The odds are against you.
Completely rational. But then the researchers measured their confidence again the exact moment after the betting ticket was printed and the money changed hands.
So literally seconds later.
Seconds later, suddenly, these exact same gamblers felt a massive, completely irrational surge in confidence. They became absolutely certain their horse was going to win.
But the horse didn't run any faster in those 3 seconds. The track conditions didn't change. They received absolutely zero new insider information.
Nothing in the objective external world changed at all. But something profound changed in their internal psychological world. They took a definitive, irreversible stand. They committed their money.
And once that physical act of commitment occurred, it created a burning psychological need to justify the decision.
Exactly, because constantly reevaluating our choices is exhausting. It requires a massive cognitive load to second-guess yourself. If you constantly doubt every single decision you make, you will be paralyzed. So your brain protects you from that exhaustion by generating a wave of artificial confidence. It just fools you into keeping your beliefs consistent with your actions.
Going back to the train track analogy, once you agree to lay down those first few rails and the train starts moving, your brain feels like it has no choice but to keep driving in that exact direction. You're just laying track and rolling forward. And here is the real danger. Even if you suddenly look up and realize the track is leading straight off a cliff, the psychological drive for consistency is so overwhelming that you'd often rather drive the train off the cliff than admit to yourself and to everyone watching that you laid the wrong track.
The drive to be right overpowers the instinct to be safe. It's truly tragic, but it's why people stay in terrible relationships, toxic jobs, or bad investments far longer than logic dictates. They've already committed so much track they just can't abandon the train.
That is heavy. Okay, so we rely on our past commitments to guide our behavior, but what happens if we don't have any past commitments to lean on? What if we are thrown into a completely alien environment, a state of total uncertainty where we have no idea what the rules are?
Who do we look to then?
We look to the crowd. This brings us to principle 4, social proof, the herd mentality.
Right. When we are unsure of ourselves, we use the actions of other people to decide on the proper behavior for ourselves. It is a highly efficient evolutionary heuristic. The underlying assumption is just that the crowd must collectively know something that we don't.
There's safety in numbers.
Precisely. If you were a prehistoric human walking through the jungle and suddenly the 5 people in front of you started running away in terror, you didn't stop to rationally investigate whether it was a tiger or just a loud noise.
You'd be lunch.
Right, you ran too. The ones who stopped to analyze the situation got eaten. The ones who blindly followed the herd survived.
So we are literally the descendants of the people who ran with the crowd. And we still do this constantly in totally mundane ways today. Like if you are walking down a busy city street and you see a group of 4 people stopped on the sidewalk, craning their necks to stare up at the sky, what do?
You look up?
You look up. You are almost physically compelled to look up. Your brain says, they see something important, I need to see it too.
It's automatic.
Or consider working late at the office. Your specific workload for the day might be completely finished by 5:00 p.m. But you look around, and all your colleagues are still diligently typing at their
Oh,
desks.
the pressure is immense.
You feel this heavy, unspoken pressure to stay in your chair. The crowd is working, so working must be the correct behavior.
We rely on it heavily when consuming as well. You
Yeah.
walk into a foreign restaurant, the menu is in a language you barely understand, and you're just overwhelmed by uncertainty. How do you resolve it? You look for the little box on the menu that says, most popular dishes.
Yes.
Instinctively, it feels like a safe harbor. If everyone else is eating the pad thai, it must be the correct choice.
My favorite example of this is at the end of a public speech or like a classical music concert. The music stops, and there's always that highly awkward, agonizing 3-second pause where absolutely everyone in the audience is silently looking around, terrified of clapping at the wrong time.
Nobody wants to be the idiot clapping between movements.
Exactly. The entire room is consumed by uncertainty. But the moment one brave soul in the back row confidently claps their hands twice, what happens?
The entire auditorium instantly erupts into thunderous applause.
Instantly. The spell of uncertainty is broken by a single point of social proof. And marketers exploit this ruthlessly. You walk into a bookstore, and a book cover screams 1 million copies sold in bright yellow font. They aren't telling you the book is well written. They are tapping into your unthinking herd mentality.
Right. The message is, 1 million people bought this, so you will be missing out if you don't. Even if those sales figures have zero bearing on whether the book actually aligns with your personal taste.
But this brings us to a highly critical and frankly terrifying dark side of this instinct. Social proof relies on the assumption that the crowd knows what it's doing. But what happens when everyone in the crowd is looking at everyone else and nobody actually knows what to do?
The blind leading the blind. This creates a psychological feedback loop known as the bystander effect, and it often leads to collective paralysis, sometimes with fatal consequences.
Break down how that loop actually works in a real scenario.
Okay, imagine someone collapses on a busy city sidewalk. Dozens of people are walking by. Everyone sees the person on the ground. But the situation is highly ambiguous. Is it a medical emergency? Is the person just sleeping? Is it a scam? Because of this intense uncertainty, everyone looks to the people around them for cues on how to react.
Right, they're searching for social proof.
But here is the tragic flaw. They overlook the fact that everyone else is also secretly looking for social proof. Everyone is trying to appear calm and collected while nervously glancing around. So what does the crowd see? The crowd sees a group of people acting calm and doing nothing.
Oh, wow. So the social proof dictates that doing nothing is the correct response.
Yes, the collective silence feeds itself. Everyone silently assumes someone else has already called an ambulance, or that it must not be a real emergency because nobody else is panicking.
Yeah.
The herd dictates inaction, leading to total paralysis.
That is terrifying. So how do you break the spell? If I am the person who collapses on the sidewalk, or I'm trapped under something and a crowd is just staring at me waiting for someone else to act, how do I hack their operating system to save my own life?
This is a vital piece of knowledge, and it's exactly why modern emergency response training has completely rewritten its protocols.
Yeah.
If you are in trouble in a crowd, you do not yell a general plea into the void. You do not yell, "Somebody help me," or "Someone call 911."
Because somebody is everybody, which means it's nobody. It diffuses responsibility.
Exactly. To break the bystander effect, you must violently shatter the condition of uncertainty that social proof relies upon. You have to force an individual out of the herd.
How?
You point directly at one specific person, you lock eyes with them, and you give a highly specific direct command. You, sir, in the red jacket, call 911 immediately.
You assign them a role.
You assign responsibility. By isolating them, you remove their ability to look to the crowd for behavioral cues. The uncertainty is gone. They now know exactly what is expected of them, and the cognitive shortcut of social proof is instantly overridden by direct instruction.
That is incredible. A literal lifesaver. Okay, so the faceless anonymous crowd is clearly a powerful influencer. But what happens when the person doing the persuading isn't a stranger on the street, but someone who has been intricately designed to make you feel warm and fuzzy?
Right, moving from strangers to friends.
Let's transition to Principle 5, liking, the persuasion of affection.
The premise here is incredibly simple, but the mechanics are devious. We are drastically more easily swayed, manipulated, and persuaded by people we genuinely like.
Which totally makes sense. Like, your best friend can convince you to help them move a heavy couch on a Saturday morning. A complete stranger couldn't convince you to do that for $100.
Right. Liking fundamentally lowers our critical defenses. When we feel affection for someone, we extend them the benefit of the doubt. We trust them. But the issue is, persuaders don't wait years to build a genuine friendship with you. They manufacture liking on the spot.
They speedrun friendship.
Exactly.
There is this legendary figure in sales history, a guy named Joe Girard. Have you heard of him?
Oh, absolutely. The greatest car salesman.
Right. He was actually listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the greatest car salesman in the world. He sold, on average, 5 cars a day, every day, for years.
Which is an insane volume.
Unheard of. And his entire overarching strategy was mind-bogglingly simple. He just sent out festive holiday cards to his thousands of former clients every single month. Happy Thanksgiving, Happy New Year, Happy 4th of July. And inside the card, there was just one sentence printed. I like you.
I like you. That was his secret weapon.
He wasn't even pitching cars in the cards. He was just systematically building a parasocial relationship. And it worked flawlessly. When those people needed a new car 5 years later, who did they think of? They thought of the guy who liked them.
Naturally.
But why do we like people? The psychological breakdowns of this principle identify 6 hidden mechanisms that manufacture affection. And honestly, studying this list feels like looking at the underlying source code of human interaction. Let's walk through them. Number 1 is physical attractiveness.
Yeah, this is deeply tied to a cognitive bias known as the halo effect.
What exactly is a halo effect? I've heard the term, but...
It's basically a glitch in our evaluation system. When a person possesses one highly positive characteristic, in this case, physical beauty, our brain automatically casts a halo over them, assuming they must also possess numerous other unrelated positive qualities.
Oh, interesting.
So without any actual evidence, we subconsciously assume that a good-looking person is also highly intelligent, remarkably honest, and genuinely kind.
It's an evolutionary misfire. We conflate physical symmetry with genetic fitness and then extend that to moral fitness. I mean, it's why aggressively mediocre actors can cultivate massive, devoted followings.
It really is. And the terrifying part is how pervasive it is.
Yeah.
It isn't just Hollywood or dating. Studies have shown this plays out in the criminal justice system.
Wait, really? In courtrooms?
Yes. Physically attractive defendants are consistently judged significantly more leniently by juries. They receive lighter sentences and are more frequently acquitted than less attractive individuals committing the exact same crimes.
Our entire justice system is vulnerable to a biological beauty bias. That is staggering.
It's a huge flaw in human judgment.
Okay, the second mechanism for manufacturing liking is similarity.
We naturally gravitate toward people who appear similar to us. This is tribalism at its core. In-group versus out-group. A shared trait signals that a person is part of our tribe, which makes us feel deeply validated and significantly reduces our biological threat response.
And salespeople fabricate this instantly. You walk into a car dealership, the salesman glances at the golf clubs in the trunk of your trade-in, and suddenly he says, "Oh, you play golf. I was just on the links this weekend." Or they see your license plate frame and say, "You're from Ohio. My uncle is from Ohio."
Even when these manufactured similarities are incredibly superficial, they work. They create a remarkably powerful sense of interpersonal connection that lowers your guard.
Just a fake sense of belonging. The third mechanism is compliments, tactical flattery.
We are total suckers for praise. Receiving a compliment triggers a massive release of dopamine in the brain. It makes us feel appreciated and valued, which radically warms our disposition toward the person delivering the praise.
But there has to be a limit here, right? If a salesman tells me I look like Brad Pitt, I'm going to immediately know he's lying and my guard goes up.
Yeah, there is a delicate threshold. If the flattery is too extreme or too frequent, it abruptly registers as insincere sycophancy. It triggers suspicion.
Right. It feels slimy.
Exactly. The truly skilled persuader knows exactly how to calibrate it. They offer just enough genuine-sounding specific praise to disarm you without tripping your internal alarm system.
It's an intricate dance. Mechanism 4 is familiarity, the mere exposure effect. The idea that constant, repeated exposure breeds comfort and trust.
The brain naturally categorizes the unknown as dangerous. The more frequently we encounter a face, a logo, or a voice without a negative outcome occurring, the more our brain classifies it as safe.
Which is why politicians spend millions plastering their names on yard signs.
Precisely. And why massive brands run the same commercial thousands of times. They aren't always trying to convince you of a logical argument. They are just trying to make their logo familiar to your visual cortex.
There is also a fascinating dynamic here regarding inherent familiarity through similar demographics.
Yes. Studies indicate that people of similar racial backgrounds, ages, or genders are scientifically much more likely to naturally assist one another in public settings. Subtle, often unsaid cues of visual sameness strongly drive deep cooperation, entirely below the level of our conscious awareness. It's the similarity and familiarity principles working in tandem.
Which perfectly leads into the fifth mechanism,
Mm,
cooperation itself. Think about corporate culture. We have all been subjected to excruciating team-building
yeah.
exercises, right?
Oh, the absolute worst.
Trust falls in the woods, escape rooms with the accounting department. Why do HR departments force this upon us?
Because humans naturally develop deep affection for those who actively cooperate with them to overcome a challenge. Active cooperation loudly signals strong alignment and shared, mutual goals. If we're pulling on the same rope, you are a friend, not a threat.
So it's forced bonding.
Yes. By forcing employees into collaborative joint projects, corporations deliberately manufacture a profound sense of team spirit and camaraderie. It binds the tribe together, which dramatically increases productivity and compliance with management.
And finally, the sixth mechanism of liking, conditioning and association, the Pavlovian response.
We associate people and brands with the feelings we experience while in their presence. This is why car commercials always feature highly attractive people driving through stunning, sun-drenched landscapes. They want to pair the positive emotional response of the scenery with the metal box they are selling.
It's why a massive, faceless telecom company will spend millions to sponsor your beloved local sports team, or why a huge bank sponsors a charity marathon. There's absolutely no logical connection between a checking account and running 26 miles.
None at all.
But they're literally trying to buy your affection by associating their logo with the euphoria of crossing the finish line.
Exactly. If a brand is consistently connected with highly positive experiences in your mind, your biological hardware will eventually compel you to like them.
It's chilling to stop and audit your own life through this lens.
Yeah.
When you realize how many of your quote-unquote genuine relationships in a commercial, professional, or even political setting might just be a calculated deployment of these six factors.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. Someone mirrors your hobbies to establish similarity, drops a well-timed compliment, ensures they are constantly visible in your feed for familiarity, and creates a fake shared goal to establish cooperation. All just to make you more amenable to their ultimate request.
It emphasizes exactly why maintaining active awareness is critical. When you feel an unusually strong, rapid liking for a salesperson or negotiator, an alarm bell should go off in your head. You have to mentally separate your warm feelings for the individual from the cold reality of the transaction you're about to make.
Right. You might love the guy selling the car, but you are driving the car home, not the guy.
Exactly. Keep them separate.
Okay, so we prefer to say yes to people we like. But it turns out we are biologically conditioned to blindly obey people we believe are in charge, regardless of whether we like them or not. Let's move to principle 6, authority. The illusion of expertise.
Right. From a very young, highly impressionable age, we are heavily conditioned by society to listen to authority figures for our own survival and social integration. We are taught that parents, teachers, doctors, and police officers hold the answers.
We feel a deep sense of internal duty toward recognized leaders, and generally this heuristic works. The doctor usually does know more about medicine than we do. The manager does know the corporate strategy.
True. Obeying genuine authority is highly efficient. But the vulnerability lies in how easily this mechanism is hacked using artificial signs of authority.
Artificial signs.
Yeah, because the human brain is notoriously lazy. It doesn't want to do the hard work of verifying someone's actual credentials, checking their medical license, or auditing their track record, so it looks for visual shortcuts. We are completely fooled into obeying the mere symbols of authority.
We don't respect the person, we respect the costume.
Exactly. Perceived expertise adds massive psychological weight to a person's words, even if the expertise is completely fabricated. Think about how corporate presentations or academic lectures begin. They almost universally start with a lengthy, deliberate introduction, outlining the speaker's degrees, their prestigious affiliations, and their vast industry experience.
Please welcome Dr. So-and-so, graduate of Harvard, author of 5 books.
That isn't just polite filler. That introduction is entirely essential for instantly establishing perceived authority. The moment the audience hears the word Harvard, their critical thinking filters lower. They magically become much more receptive and far less skeptical to whatever claims the speaker makes next.
Visual triggers are even more insidious, though. A stark white lab coat instantly commands respect. It makes us associate the wearer with deep scientific rigor and untainted truth. Advertisers use this constantly.
All the time.
They will put a literal actor, a guy who was waiting tables yesterday, into a white lab coat with a stethoscope around his neck and have him tell you which toothpaste to buy. And it works. Our brains see the coat and completely bypass the logic that says, this is a paid commercial.
It goes beyond uniforms, too, to general symbols of wealth and status. Titles, clothing, and automobiles are basically the holy trinity of artificial authority.
There is a brilliant, specific example regarding this from the source material. The high-end real estate agent. You've seen this guy. He deliberately rents a luxury European sports car he can't actually afford. He buys a massive, gaudy designer watch on credit and wears bespoke, tailored suits priced astronomically above his actual pay grade.
Yep, the classic image.
I once heard an agent defend this practice by saying, I wasn't paying for the suit, I was paying for people to take me seriously.
That is a highly strategic, incredibly calculated, and ruthlessly effective use of the raw principle of authority.
It's professional cosplay. And our brains completely fall for it. We unconsciously elevate our internal perception of their social status, their credibility, and their market knowledge entirely because of the thread count of the fabric they are wearing and the hood ornament on the car they parked outside.
We did to jump to conclusions.
Right. If he wears a $10,000 watch, he must sell a lot of houses. If he sells a lot of houses, he must be good at his job. We are inclined to blindly trust him because he visually aligns with our internal, culturally programmed expectation of what success looks like.
It reveals how frighteningly superficial our mental shortcuts can be.
Yeah.
We rely on the symbols because they're easy to process quickly. But titles can be invented, suits can be bought, and cars can be rented. The symbols of authority are available to anyone with a credit card.
Which means we are constantly vulnerable to well-dressed con artists. It's a scary thought.
Very much so.
Okay. We have spent this entire deep dive talking about how people and social circumstances manipulate our operating system. But our final principle shifts the focus entirely away from the persuader and onto the object of our desire itself. It targets our absolute primal biological aversion to loss. This is Principle 7, scarcity. The panic of missing out.
Scarcity expertly taps into one of the most fundamental, ancient aspects of human psychology: loss aversion. In evolutionary terms, the fear of losing something motivates human decision-making far more powerfully than the pleasant thought of gaining something of equal value.
Why is that, though?
Think back to our ancestors. If you had enough food to survive the week, finding an extra bush of berries was nice, it was gain. But losing the food you already had meant starvation and death. Therefore, the psychological pain of losing something is biologically wired to be significantly more intense than the joy of gaining it.
We are hypersensitive to loss, and we see this exploited every single day, especially in the digital age. You are casually browsing online, looking at a pair of shoes. You are totally on the fence. You don't really need them. But then a little blinking red message appears under the image. Only 2 pairs left in stock.
Or a massive clock appears at the top of the screen, counting down the seconds of a flash sale.
Yes. Or you are watching a live auction and 2 bidders are fighting over an item.
And what happens in your brain when you see that blinking red text or that ticking clock? A chemical alarm goes off. It is no longer a casual shopping experience. It becomes an overwhelming biological drive to aggressively secure the resource right before it is permanently gone forever.
It changes the whole vibe.
Scarcity, actively, chemically, hinders our ability to think clearly. It literally short-circuits rational, mathematical consideration and replaces it with impulsive, emotional fear.
So the internal monologue shifts. It's no longer, do I really have $80 in my budget for these shoes? It instantly becomes, I cannot let some faceless stranger on the internet take these shoes away from me.
Exactly.
It taps into our competitive social instincts. If other people are fighting for this item, it must be incredibly valuable.
Manufactured limited-time offers, exclusive drops, and aggressive flash sales create a massive artificial sense of intense urgency and fierce social competition. The persuader is suggesting to your primitive brain that if you do not act aggressively and immediately, someone else from the tribe is going to successfully snag the vital resource out from under you.
Let me push back on this just a bit, because isn't it true that some things actually are rare and valuable? A first edition Hemingway novel or a vintage 1960s sports car or beachfront real estate. Scarcity is a foundational concept of real-world economics. It drives price.
That is a very fair point, and it's a crucial distinction to make. We must separate natural rarity from manufactured psychological scarcity. Natural rarity legitimately dictates market price. There's only so much gold in the earth. But psychological scarcity, the way marketers and persuaders wield it, does something much more insidious.
What does it do?
It doesn't just increase demand, it aggressively alters our fundamental perception of the item's raw intrinsic quality.
Wait, so it tricks our brain into thinking the actual physical item is better than it objectively is?
Yes, a highly mundane, perfectly ordinary item, say a plain white t-shirt, can miraculously appear profoundly extraordinary, desirable, and high quality, simply when it is effectively presented as being highly restricted or rare. Limited edition.
Ah, the supreme brick phenomena.
Exactly. Furthermore, manufactured scarcity taps into our deepest desires for elevated social status. By successfully securing this scarce item, you trick yourself into feeling like a valued member of a highly exclusive elite group. You aren't just buying a white t-shirt, you are buying the victory of being one of the few who beat the crowd.
Wow. When you strip it all away, we are basically just highly evolved primates wearing designer clothes, fighting over the last shiny rock in the cave.
We truly are. We are operating on incredibly ancient biological hardware, trying to navigate a hyper-modern, algorithmically driven commercial world.
Which perfectly brings us to our summary. We have covered the vast architecture of Robert Cialdini's framework. Let's do a rapid-fire recap so you listening right now have your mental checklist ready. You can build your new psychological defense system.
Let's do it.
First, we looked at the linguistic hack, how the mere presence of the word because satisfies our brain's desperate need for justification and completely bypasses our critical filter.
Then we explored reciprocation,
Mm.
the heavy biological instinct to repay kindness, and how persuaders use unsolicited gifts to trap us in a web of indebtedness.
Third was commitment and consistency, the intense internal pressure to align our present actions with our past choices to avoid looking flaky, leading us to lay tracks straight off a cliff.
Fourth was social proof, the herd mentality that kicks in when we are consumed by uncertainty, forcing us to blindly copy the crowd.
Fifth was liking how physical attractiveness, fabricated similarities, and tactical flattery lower our defenses and make us compliant.
Sixth was authority, our deeply conditioned, childhood-instilled obedience not just to actual leaders, but to the superficial symbols of power, like suits and titles.
And finally, scarcity, our absolute primal, loss-averse panic of missing out on a dwindling resource.
The absolute key takeaway from all of this, the entire reason we spent this whole time shining a massive spotlight on these largely invisible subconscious processes, in intention.
Intention.
Recognizing these automatic mental triggers allows you to navigate the complex social and commercial world with crystal clear intention. When you feel that sudden surge of artificial confidence, or that agonizing guilt of obligation, or that panic of a countdown timer, you can pause the autopilot.
You can wake the bouncer up.
Exactly. You can actively intercept the shortcut. And by doing so, you maintain control of your own operating system.
Right. The next time you walk into that hardware store for a $10 hammer, you're going to walk out with just a $10 hammer.
You are back in the driver's seat.
But I want to leave you with one final, slightly unsettling thought to ponder on your own. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about how these mechanisms work in the analog real world. A waitress dropping a mint, a salesman pointing at your golf clubs, a crowd staring at the sky.
Right. Real-world interactions.
But now that you deeply understand the mechanics of these cognitive exploits, imagine what happens when advanced algorithms and artificial intelligence learn to perfectly, seamlessly combine all of these weapons simultaneously.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Imagine an AI uniquely tailoring these psychological triggers to your highly specific digital footprint. It knows exactly what time of day you are most vulnerable to scarcity. It knows exactly which fabricated similarities will make you trust a synthetic voice. It creates fake social proof generated by thousands of bots just to sway your opinion. If an algorithm knows your operating system better than you do, who is really pulling the strings then?
That is the defining psychological question for the modern era.
Something to think about the next time you get a personalized online recommendation that feels a little too perfect. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. You have been armed with the awareness you need. Stay aware out there, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.